convincing story that maps onto reality, and that's why the central narrative is falling apart.
Right now in the United States, people should not be walking around with masks.
We must see the central narrative for the fiction that it is. We are Americans.
While elections are sometimes messy, this was a secure election.
The founders began the fight for human liberty and self-governance, and it's up to us to finish the job.
I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now.
This is the end game.
All the people that have gone out there against the mainstream media and said, you're going to call us racist, you're going to call us potential Timothy McVeighs, fuck you. War.
Immensely seductive. Quite sure he's right. An obsessionally neurotic. Pretty dangerous, in fact.
Do you mean you doubt your powers to convince him?
Worse than that. What I'm afraid of is his power to convince me.
Let us never tolerate outrageous conspiracy theories.
Sweetheart, be reasonable.
All right, here we are, everybody. It is Wednesday, November 13th, 2024, the 1393rd day of dystopia. I'm your moderator, Chris Paul. Let's be reasonable. Hello to everyone. Thank you for joining the live stream. I'm sorry that I've been absent over the last few days. I've been driving around this great American terrain, enjoying every bit of it. I'm in the southeast right now in Charleston, South Carolina. Just an absolutely beautiful little city. Has kind of a chaotic vibe about it a little bit, but I guess all cities do in a way. Incredible architecture, incredible history. We were walking around the historic district today, and there was a building, I think it was called the State Building, but massive signs on, the historic, like the metal engraved signs about how it was the home of Charleston Freemasonry, essentially. And the building was built in, I think, the late 1600s. And it just immediately occurred to me how much of this country existed before this country existed. And I think that's something that we should never lose sight of, and that we often do lose sight of it. We have our lives as we have them now, and we have the American history as it is taught to us. In 1492, Columbus sailed the ocean blue in the Nina and Pinta and Santa Maria, and they landed in the Caribbean or something. And all of a sudden they discovered America. Oh, these aren't Indians. Let's call them Indians anyway. And then, I don't know, a couple centuries after that, the Pilgrims arrived in Massachusetts, and they and the Indians had Thanksgiving. And then sometime after that, the Constitution was born, and now we have America. Before that, there was no America. So it's always good to see those old buildings and remember that actually there were quite developed cities way before we ever had a constitution. And there was a basis for society before that. And to the extent that our society was founded by people who had escaped the regime system in Europe and come here to exemplify what it means to be a free man or a free woman. If that's what they did, and they did that prior to the Constitution, then there must have been some basis beyond the Constitution for them to want to do that. And I think it is that basis or those bases that is kind of more foundational in the American mythology throughout history. And I believe that we're starting to get to learn some of that. And I hope that it'll become much more clear as we go on. I think it's, the more I study it, the more history I read, the more clear it becomes to me that there was already a developed society here and people who had these ideals. It's not like people were just normal and then the Constitution was dropped on us and everybody was like, oh, so we'll just govern ourselves this way. Before, we had no idea how to even stop killing each other all day long and raping each other. But now they've said this piece of paper rules us, and so now we're free Americans. I think there was something before that, and I think that we should focus on what happened before that occasionally. It's not an attack on the Constitution. It's just that there was something before that that led to the Constitution, and there were other forces besides that that led to the Constitution. And it's important, if we want to get back to the foundational roots of all these American values and bring the country to, I think, where most American patriots and most America First and MAGA people want it to be. I think it's important to understand those things in principle so that we know what we're actually arguing for, because we can argue for some of the principles that went into the ratification of the Constitution, and those principles are pro-regime principles that were mixed with pro-freedom and pro-liberty and pro-American principles, and they gave them a hybrid system. So we have to understand that from all sides. We can't just take the notions that we were raised to believe through the early stages of our American indoctrination. Just having a look here at the chat. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining the live stream. I will try to get one more episode out this week, and it might be a live stream episode. I know that there's been a lot going on with the political news. It seems like the rest of the news, the world news, is just gone. It's just all politics. Who is Donald Trump planning to appoint, and how are we going to thwart those people? How are we going to frame Donald Trump's next term? Because now he has been declared the winner of a fake election to take back the public mandate that he already had. And, we talked about this all at length last week. I think that we can now let some of the emotion from the inevitable declaration of election victory. Donald Trump has always had the public mandate. At some point, there was going to be a public recognition of that mandate. And the television saying that he won a once every 4 years election is something that grants the public that catharsis to be able to accept that Donald Trump actually is the ruler of our society again, to the extent that there is a ruler. It's funny because we have gone from people pretending that Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes and was a legitimate president of the United States of America to him simply being removed from the running to be that again, and not a single person anywhere caring. And immediately Kamala Harris was thrust into that position, the fake vice president. And people were like, okay, well, I guess that we can choose Kamala to be our next ruler since we can't choose Trump. And they just attempted to do that. And there was never any mandate for Kamala, never any possibility of a mandate. She is roundly hated and disrespected. People know how she got to the position she got to. They know what she represents, both philosophically and politically, but also morally. And there was never any possibility that she was going to become likable. The laugh is awful. She's uncaring. She doesn't know anything. She's an airhead with no experience in actually accomplishing anything. So there was never any chance of that happening. And people just accepted that she would be the choice for ruler that they had the opportunity to support if it wasn't going to be Donald Trump. That didn't work. And nobody thinks that Kamala Harris is the ruler. Nobody thinks that Joe Biden is the ruler. People aren't sure if we have a president, generally speaking. But as soon as the television said that Donald Trump won the fake election last week, immediately Donald Trump is seen as the ruler of America once again. And now he is choosing the people that are going to be in his cabinet and in his administration. And we'll talk about some of that today. But let's start out with the passing of this torch from the fake president, Joe Biden, back to Donald Trump in a publicly recognized sense. Not that Donald Trump needed it from him, but maybe this is just simply the optical end of the false reality layer of our global regime administrative state stacked on top of the reality prime constitutional republic of our founding, and the one that clearly represents the public mandate, with the people supporting Donald Trump as the executive and the military clearly on his side, the control of media and finance both drifting back in his direction. So here is the
wanted to go inside the Oval Office. Let's watch.
Many cases, not a very nice world, but it is a nice world today, and I appreciate it very much. A transition that's so smooth, it'll be as smooth as it can get, and I very much appreciate that, Jim.
You're welcome. Thank you all.
So obviously this was in progress. And in my studio, we have a lot of networks on at the same time. So I can see out of the corner.
All right. Blah, blah, blah from Harris Faulkner. We have the traditional Joe Biden staffers rush media out of the room saying thank you as many times as possible, as loud as they can, as fast as they can, in hopes that that will cover up for the microphones and cameras anyone attempting to ask questions and what the contents of those questions would be. Get them all out of the room. No questions will be asked of Joe Biden. I'm sure Donald Trump had no fear of any of that. He just kind of sat there laughing and smiling. You might remember back when Trump was doing the everyday press conferences throughout 2020 during the very deadly pandemic. The reporters, especially people like Caitlin Collins and Jim Acosta, would be screaming questions at Trump from the White House press room as Trump walked off, so that those questions got in there. They gave themselves last word in a way that they could kind of cover up in a public relations sense and an optics sense. We were asking the president these questions, and he walked away without answering them. That is a total trick. It's cheating. It's immoral. It's unfair. It's the sort of thing where in politics, you can't really point that out or complain about it, because then, you will be costing yourself. You'll be giving them an opportunity to say that you're complaining about the press and that it's your fault for being anti-press. And then it reaffirms the idea that you walked out without answering their questions. And so these are the oldest tricks in the book. It's funny that they have determined that to never allow that to happen, they're just going to scream at all the reporters until they leave. I always like seeing that. Now, one thing, there's virtually no content to this video other than that and the picture of the two of them, shaking hands. But I want to put this back on screen for a second.
I very much appreciate it.
Turn the sound off here. Notice the fireplace. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with fireplaces. I have seen a fire or two in my lifetime, and they don't just consistently do the same thing over and over again like a GIF of a fireplace would. At best, that is a gas-powered fireplace. Okay. And I guess put one in the chat if you agree that that is a gas-powered fireplace, or potentially a video of a fireplace like one would have on their television. And hit 2 if you think that I am crazy for questioning the fireplace. and that is absolutely a real wood burning fireplace. And so let me just kind of read the room a little bit. As you do that, I am going to continue to charge forward. I'm seeing ones. Okay. Oh, there's a 2 in there. So I guess there's not total agreement, but the ones are dominating the idea that it is either video or a gas powered fireplace. So the fireplace, you might say, well, that's neither here nor there. Of course, they're probably going to have a fake fireplace in the Oval Office. They're not going to have a real fireplace. Joe Biden's not going to be building his fire. So I think we have like maybe 5-to-1, 6-to-1 ratio on the ones to the twos. Except here's the thing. I actually bothered trying to look this up because I wanted to know, because we've talked before, before I get too deeply into this, we have discussed before that there are 2 fake White Houses. In addition to, there are 2 fake White Houses we know about in short walking distance from the real White House in Washington, D.C. There's the Eisenhower Executive Office building across the street, where there is an auditorium, and they occasionally use that auditorium to do Joe Biden meetings, these teleconferences that they were doing throughout the 2021, kind of early 2022 period, while we were still pretending that there was a very deadly pandemic and that Joe Biden had to handle these very important presidential level meetings without actually meeting anyone in person. He still occasionally takes out the tiny desk over there and does very important, very presidential work over at the Eisenhower Executive Office. There's also a White House replica built into an office building down the street, also on Pennsylvania Avenue. I think it might even be 1700 Pennsylvania Avenue. I don't know that we need to get back into the article. They essentially built an entirely filmable museum, quote unquote, of a secondary White House meant to resemble the original White House in Washington, D.C., down to that absolute last detail, including to the details of Joe Biden's family Bible in the Oval Office. The idea being that Joe Biden is actually serving in the real White House. And whenever we are filming something coming out of the White House, it is, of course, at the real White House that Joe Biden works in but doesn't live in, and only works in every now and then. We're just supposed to accept all that is real and not even think about whether or not they might film White House scenes down at the set they built down the street that they're now calling a museum and saying is open to the public. I ask you, which fireplace did we just see? Which filming location did we just see? And I'm sure that you think, oh, come on, this is a conspiracy theory. That can't be real. Well, let's look at this article from a fire-oriented company called Full Service Chimney. 9 surprising facts on the U.S. White House fireplaces. Now, they have a picture here of the fake president, Joe Biden, with the fake vice president, Kamala Harris. That is Janet Yellen. This is one of, I think that this is Brian, man, I want to say Freeze, but I don't think that's right. Deese, D-E-E-S-E, Brian Deese. This guy is the guy who said on video from the very real White House that he was talking about the liberal international rules-based order, like just straight out said it as plain as day, and was widely quoted for having done that. Now, this is a very, perhaps the Oval Office just really is this rundown. This does not look like a very good Oval Office. That is the fireplace of this Oval Office. Now, they're talking about presidential fireplace facts. There is Reagan and the Israeli prime minister. I'm not sure which one that is. But here we have, just down here at the end, there's Obama with some wood stacked in the fireplace. The sitting commander-in-chief at the time of this blog, Joe Biden, has quickly become a fan of burning real wood fires in the Oval Office fireplace while he's working. Rumor has it, his German shepherds, Major and Champ, are big fans of it too. And there's an article where you can learn more about Biden's daily presidential routine. Major and Champ, what happened to Commander? I thought Commander was our guy. Oh, here we are. A CNN article. That's what it linked to about Joe Biden's fireplace time. In February of 2021, they had to publish this article to make people comfortable with Joe Biden actually being at the real White House. Inside the president's routine, Oval Office fires and early bedtimes. Oh, man. Gotta love it. He has expressed a preference for a fire built in the Oval Office fireplace and sometimes adds a log himself to keep it going. His dogs, 2 German Shepherds called Major and Champ, sometimes join him. There is the old Maskey himself, our boy Blue, the fake president of the United States, Joe Biden. Okay, so both CNN and this chimney sweeping place agree that Joe Biden likes real fires in the fireplace. And there is not today a real fire in that fireplace. I am going to have to disagree with the people in the chat who left 2s. I would say that is a very, very fake fireplace that does not look at all like a real wood fire fireplace. I'm open to being wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure I'm not wrong. Let's just take one more look at it, and I will try to reassess my own biases.
Wanted to go inside the Oval Office. Let's watch.
Oh, it is roaring, that fireplace. I don't know. Something about it does not appeal to me as a natural fire. That is also an awfully big fire to have going on November 13th. I don't think it's freezing in Washington, D.C. That to me does not look like a real fire. I don't know. Well, to each his own. You guys can be the judge of that. Seems like they are not in the Oval Office. Either that or in the last couple of years, Joe Biden, who loves to throw a log on his fire as the very real president of the United States of America, has chosen to forego his love of logs and instead have a gas fireplace installed or just a video screen. The idea of the Oval Office, the White House Museum down the street, is that they would be able to film scenes in each and every one of the rooms. Let me just see if I can find this article. I remember it being from the Associated Press. Let's see. Oh, gosh, I would love to just have this pop right up. And of course, it's not going to. Hold for processing. White House Museum. Let's see if we can find that. Ah, there we are. So just real quick here. This is the Associated Press from September 20th of this year. Tourists can finally visit the Oval Office. A replica is opening near the White House on Monday. Oh, look at the scenes. So immersive theater, terrific thing. It can come down. Oh, we're going to have so many tourists here. Where is it? The wallpaper, draperies, rug, furniture, paintings, and other artwork are exact replicas of the furnishings as they are currently in the Oval Office. The plan is to change the decor with each future president. Technology transforms the rooms. They make it so that they can virtually have any scene. Leaving the theater, visitors will walk to the replica Oval Office along a stone path resembling the White House colonnade with a view of art made to represent the Rose Garden. Another exhibit shows how they use it for social functions. Separate gallery. Where are we? The model of the south side of the White House. The back side of the model looks like a dollhouse, exposing the cutaways. The Education Center. Hold on here. Anyhow, so they have the ability to be able to display almost every scene in the White House just down the street. And I would suspect that at the White House Museum, if you were going to represent and replicate the Oval Office fireplace, in that instance, you would use a gas-powered fireplace or potentially a screen that displays a fire. And gotta say, I know it's a conspiracy theory, quote unquote, and I know that's one of those conspiracy theories like body doubles and clones and whatnot that people think, oh, that can't be. They would never fake something like that. Yes, of course they would. Yes, of course they would fake something like that. And they have no reason of ever telling you otherwise, because the more people force others to adhere to these ridiculous standards of epistemology that continue to lead us to terrible conclusions, always delegating our thinking and our reasoning and our moral judgments to sources of authority. For as long as people keep doing that, they're going to keep forcing us into situations where we have to reaffirm those notions. And when you talk to information gatekeepers, and we have plenty of them in the so-called truth movement, they will tell you that you're crazy for thinking about these things, thus reaffirming those ideas for themselves, thus committing the rejection of those sorts of ideas to their identity. And we grant the regime power to fool us about everything forever because we're too concerned with calling the little things fake and calling the big things fake. We can have whatever opinion we want about UFOs, but it's crazy to talk about whether or not that fake looking fireplace in the fake Oval Office where the fake president sits is a fake fireplace. That's bananas. So let's get into some other stuff. Now, many people were upset, not probably the people in this chat right now, but many people were upset about how I approached the fake election prior to the fake election, worried that I was somehow dooming because I would call the election fake, that I was going to somehow cost Trump votes by not hammering into people's heads that they should vote because I want them to vote, as if that would be a good motivation for anyone to vote in the first place. They wanted me to be rah-rah, and they wanted me to celebrate once the TV told us that Donald Trump had won in a landslide. And Trump has since told us that. Fox News has told us it relentlessly. People in the so-called truth movement, many of the people who are gatekeepers about many things, tell us that we won in a landslide and we should celebrate that. And probably not do anything other than celebrate it. Certainly, let's not question the election results, because then that might invalidate this massive win that Donald Trump has had. Donald Trump already had the public narrative. All that happened was the TV told us that Donald Trump won a fake election. We could already revel in the fact that we represented a majority. A majority had come over to MAGA, to America First, to Donald Trump, or maybe even to like the kind of like sub positions where they are a little bit on board, not really, like don't really know what's going on, but are, you know, generally friendly to the cause, like J.D. Vance people or Robert F. Kennedy Jr., like Maha people. All of those are kind of sub movements that have not really kind of figured out the whole thing yet. And the hope is that they will, because there's a lot more to go once you reach those points. But fine, you know, those people are on their path, maybe a bit behind us, but on the path, and good for them. All that's wonderful. On the other hand, we have people that are reaffirming the legitimacy of our elections, which is one of the regime's most highly prioritized outcomes. And people are just like, hey, let's give it to them. Donald Trump won. Let's say the elections are real because Trump won. If we say that they're fake still, that'll make it like Trump didn't win a real election. And of course, he didn't win a real election. He won a fake election. He had the public mandate. If 2020 was a real election, he certainly won that. There's no way Joe Biden received 81 million real lawful American votes. The outcomes of fake elections don't matter. Donald Trump has the public mandate. He is doing things in a constitutional fashion, which shows that he actually respects the society in accordance with the founding. He has the military on his side. He has won control over dominant media, and that would be not primarily us in particular. I'm not trying to take undue credit for that, but us in general, MAGA broadly, and the independent media and people on social media. So all the standards of potential legitimacy for the leader of a nation, Donald Trump meets those. He does not need the TV to say, yes, we held a real election and Donald Trump was the winner and the people did it, because that's preposterous. Kamala Harris did not receive 72 million real lawful American votes. That's what it's up to now. And there's no reason to believe otherwise. She has more votes than Barack Obama. How's that possible? Is it possible? Of course not. She's not even a real candidate. She wasn't in a real election campaign. The campaign wasn't real. Her campaign especially wasn't real. Didn't receive a single primary vote. But aside from the illegitimacy of it, it also just wasn't real. The whole thing was a show. And people participated in that show because apparently they needed to, but it is still a show. And we can see that now from the results and the way that things are playing out since then. And so let's go through some of that stuff. I know that I've missed a few days now. There's a lot to talk about here because it's all very interesting. So I'm going to try not to speed through all of it too quickly. I talked at considerable length about many of the nominees and how we should approach the rollout of these nominees for the new administration. This morning on Badlands Daily, I was with Gordon, Goes to Base Patrick Henry. So I would encourage everybody, if you want to hear like the philosophy behind some of those thoughts, I'll get into a little bit of it today, but for the rest of it, you can just go listen to that episode of Badlands Daily. I might even try to put that up on my podcast this week. So yeah, so let's get into this. This is CNN today.
And he's claiming a popular vote victory that did not occur. I mean, I think we heard some of that in the beginning of that speech, but
did not occur to the size he said it. He may very well have a popular vote victory when all the
by
votes
7.1 million. That's not the case.
That will not be the case. See, and obviously there's still a million plus, maybe 2 million votes to count out of California. I would imagine the national popular vote will continue to narrow in margin, though it looks like Donald Trump will indeed have this new victory that he did not have the last time around, that he was elected president, which is not just in the Electoral College, but also claiming a national popular vote mandate.
Okay, so that is the much hated Jim Acosta, one of the real Trump antagonists of Trump's first publicly recognized term as president. Acosta said there, he mentioned the difference that Donald Trump had referred to, the difference of 7 million votes, Donald Trump's popular vote margin at the time of his speaking that. Donald Trump was said to have lost by about 7 million votes in 2020. So we have an interesting mirror effect on that. We also have Jim Acosta adding a 0.1 there. So rather than 7 million, I think Acosta just said it was 7.1 million. Very interesting. I wonder what Jim Acosta is doing by, maybe he's just looking at different numbers. It's probably just that. And then we had David Chalian remarking that Donald Trump still might preserve his popular vote advantage, though it will shrink. He was able to get a win this time that he was not able to get the last time because, of course, we're told he did not win the popular vote last time. Now, is this going to go dramatically in the direction of Trump falling behind in the popular vote? Did Jim Acosta just cause a false start on a regime media narrative in the course of the next few weeks? I mean, if there was to be a challenge to Donald Trump's legitimacy on the basis of some election manipulation in a state, maybe manipulation of the reporting, maybe they would say that some say it was called too soon or whatever. In that instance, they would want the popular vote to be decisive as to who was president. And that's an agenda item that they've pursued now for certainly years, if not decades. And I feel like it's closer to decades. I feel like that being something that I supported when I was a liberal. And, you know, the support of that position, I think would it would at least be a worthwhile discussion to really get into. And I haven't spent a lot of time on it, but if we had real elections, perhaps that would be something to get into, because we might have a more direct democracy in terms of the federal government. Now, if the federal government was going to be doing far less with based on far less resources, and they were really restricted to just the ideas that we would find in the Constitution, man, maybe in that framing, maybe in that situation, it would make sense to have additional direct democracy in a form where the elections can be made legitimate. We don't have that now, so it's not even a conversation right now. But in that instance, maybe there would be a more interesting conversation to be had there. There are probably going to be solutions that incorporate those things, Bitcoin and blockchain solutions, potentially anything that would actually incorporate some sort of secure and verifiable voting in an online or electronic form. If it was to ever be able to gain the public's trust, I could potentially see something like that allowing for greater direct democracy along those lines, where the public would be voting. And, we think that might be horrifying now because of the media control that the regime has, that they would just be able to mislead people into voting against their best interests at all times. And maybe there's something to that. I think in the new information environment, that too will be less of a problem than it has been in the past. But about the popular vote for this election in general, if they were going to challenge Donald Trump, it would be wise of them to have the popular vote on their side so that they can say that the majority of people didn't even want Donald Trump in the first place. And it was the Electoral College that granted him that. It was that everyone was calling things too early, knowing that there were all these votes to come in from other places. And if they're adding votes on late with California, can they find them from somewhere else? Maybe they can. I don't know what the plan is, and I'm not trying to bum anybody out. I'm not in any I'm not fearful at all, and I don't believe Donald Trump is in any danger of losing the public mandate or of quote unquote losing an election or being prevented from taking office. I'm not concerned about those scenarios at all. All those scenarios, to the extent that they are real, have been planned for. It's just that we have to continue to watch these things and know what the regime's tricks are, because we don't want these things to happen again. So we have to know what they're doing, judge our analysis based on what emerges in reality, be mindful that we aren't going to have the whole story at any point, and then keep looking ahead. So where are they going with this popular vote story? We were told it's a landslide. It is impossible, no matter what the Electoral College says, it is impossible to claim that Donald Trump won a landslide if he did not even win the popular vote. Okay. And again, public mandate landslide, 100%. I believe more than 80% of the country is probably on Donald Trump's side at this point. And even people who did not support him are probably relieved in some way that if they have problems and if everybody gets upset, at least they can go back to blaming their problems on Donald Trump, rather than having to be the one who outwardly supported the fake President Joe Biden or the preposterous Kamala Harris, and then taking responsibility for everything as it falls apart. So, hey, man, maybe we are just on a faster timeline. Maybe we advanced and did our jobs really well, and people understand that this is what must be done going forward. He does seem to have widespread support among the people, and there doesn't seem to be much resistance to the declaration of Trump's victory or Trump's assuming that victory whatsoever. I know that some feminists are shaving their heads and swearing off sex, which are kind of the same things. But beyond that, I'm not sure that anybody's really all that upset. So let's continue. Very interesting, though, if they actually try to go that route and say that Trump didn't win the popular vote. I wonder if at that point, the gatekeepers and the protectors of the regime will consider that maybe, just maybe, our elections really are even faker than we said. I have said they are completely and totally fake the entire time. It is impossible with our elections to produce legitimate representatives and to put them into government. And our government remains illegitimate regardless of whether or not Donald Trump takes control. And the TV tells us that Donald Trump is president and he has the entire cast of television characters around him being the administration. The government will still be illegitimate because our elections are illegitimate. Now, if the people all grant Donald Trump the mandate, that's all the legitimacy we need, but the elections are incapable of providing it. And for the people who cannot claim a public mandate, which is virtually every other politician anywhere in office in the Congress and in the Senate, there's no claim for legitimacy for those people because they didn't win their elections. They cannot prove that they won their elections. The states have their own elections. People apparently don't care about election integrity at the state or local levels, by and large. Some of you might, but people by and large don't care about that. And so, there's that argument that according to those standards, the states held the elections that they planned on holding. These are the representatives of the state that they're sending to the federal government. That is their decision and the decision of the people in those states. But if you want them to have legitimacy insofar as that they were elected in the process as it's laid out and communicated to the public, which is what allows the public to assume that those politicians have the public mandate and the legitimacy in the other form. Well, did they win those elections? Can they prove they won those elections? No, they can't. So at some point, the public should step up and say, the people should step up and say that those congressmen and senators are not legitimate. And it's very interesting that the good ones, the quote unquote good ones who we've known about, the ones who play major roles on television, many of them are getting plucked right out of the Congress and the Senate and being brought into the Trump administration, which has, again, its own kind of mandate and legitimacy. Forever Tool 67 says, how do we know who has the mandate with fake elections? Well, the first part of the question is, are you able to sense who has the public mandate? Did you at any time really get the sense that people approved of Joe Biden being the president, even just as a result of the system? I would say that there was about as much dissent from that notion as there has ever been in my lifetime. And the truth is that there should be very little dissent, if at all. In a legitimate process that the people understood to be legitimate, there would be almost no dissent. People would understand that they lost and they wouldn't like it, but they wouldn't, I think it would be very unlikely that they would think that the person said to be president is illegitimate, okay? So there is already kind of an underlying sense of the legitimacy, and people can understand that. When they are told by the television that someone else is now president and there is not a revolt, I think you can be relatively sure at that point that the mandate is plausible. And I think there are a bunch of other indirect ways as well. Everything Donald Trump does proves that he is extremely popular. His social media following, the impact of his statements, the ability to end careers of possible people, the ability to destroy their public standing with a few words, the ability to have a mass independent media movement immediately vet whoever it is that is directly opposing Trump, the ability to make songs immediately number one in the country. You could go down the list. The reception that he gets at football games and UFC events. All of these things are indicators of public popularity, which gives public mandate. Joe Biden never had the ability to do any of that stuff. Joe Biden didn't have the ability to draw people to his rallies in 2020. And Kamala Harris didn't have it this time around, which is why they flew people all over the country to attend her events. So he followed up and said, I know Trump has in my local area, I know Trump has the mandate. In my family, he doesn't. Beyond local. I mean, maybe there's nothing beyond local. You can see it happening nationally. So I don't know. I don't know what other signs you could need. other than that, if people aren't opposing something that everyone knows about and everyone has at least some more than surface level understanding, especially after 9 years, I think it's pretty clear that out of the people who could have a public mandate, Donald Trump clearly has the biggest and most powerful public mandate. And there is no one who is in a close second. So if that position is going to be one that can achieve a public mandate, Donald Trump is the one who has that. Yeah, I don't see any argument against that being effective. I don't know. Maybe there is one, and I'm not thinking of it. Totally possible. But as far as the local question goes, people should be focused on the local stuff. If you are putting roots down in your community, you should get involved in the local community and know what's happening there and hold local officials to account. Make some phone calls, write some emails. If something's going wrong in your neighborhood, who are you going to call? Your local officials, and probably not the Ghostbusters, because I have strong doubts that the problem in your local community is ghosts. Let's go to Breitbart. This is from November 12th, so yesterday. Speaker Johnson orders entire Biden administration to preserve and retain all records and documents. So we have the false reality layer government, the fake and illegitimate uniparty government of the global regime in America. And is it the corporate government of the United States? Some would say yes. Maybe we will have a conclusive answer to that question one day. House Speaker Mike Johnson on Tuesday ordered the entire administration of President Joe Biden to preserve all records and communications in the waning days of the outgoing Democrat administration as former President Donald Trump's team prepares to take over. He has sent letters to all 18 federal departments ordering them to retain and preserve documents. This could become an explosive storyline if outgoing Biden administration officials attempt to delete or destroy documents that shed light on some of the radical policies they pursued or scandals with regard to censorship or other major storylines of the past 4 years, such as the deadly withdrawal from Afghanistan or the wide open border. So the false reality layer of the government has still worked to launder money, to leverage influence so that the agenda is implemented in ways that are hard to strip back in the various states and local communities where they have pushed money in. We talked about some of this a couple of weeks ago while watching, not while watching, sorry. I think it was I don't know, it was one of the Friday episodes where we really focus on the sweetest regime panic of the week. And they were talking about how they needed to push all the money from these departments and agencies into various NGOs, their corporate partnerships, their public-private partnerships, so that whoever needed to implement the agenda out and about in the world would have the money, the resources, and the power of quote-unquote law to continue implementing that agenda while they attempted to subvert and delegitimize Donald Trump for the next 4 years, so that they could eventually come back in, control that administrative state by telling the public that they had won another fake election, and then get the whole thing right back in gear. Now, that would be a nightmare scenario for the supporters of Donald Trump, which is another reason why we have to make sure that the election system is fixed. We can't just get excited that Donald Trump has nominated all our favorite television characters to have these new powerful roles. We need to actually make sure that the election system is changed and that people are doing the business of the American people, because otherwise they come right back in and they keep it going again. Jay Gonzalez says, I like how Ghost said you're like our movement's therapist. That's actually a Seth Keshel line. That was Seth's Seth's terminology there, because we had kind of different viewpoints and still have different viewpoints on elections. And I think that I just provided a good sounding board for him to hear a different, because Seth talks primarily to election integrity people and to the people doing the data and demographic work. And so I think that I just provided a different kind of perspective to him that occasionally would calm him down and sometimes probably just annoy him. Okay, so we're talking about the people on that governmental level, the false reality layer, potentially deleting and destroying their documents. Now, they just kept going. And at some level, whatever fakery is going on at that high level, however much of it is a show to the public, at some point it stops being a show. At some point, people at a high level are not let in on the trick, because then otherwise the people who know the trick are bound to reveal the trick to the people who need to continue being tricked. And some of the people in the government agencies on the side of Joe Biden, the people who would bow down and kiss Joe Biden's feet, the people who would bow down to the regime as a business for the rest of their lives, that's where they get the money from. Those people don't need to be in on the trick. They need to be playing along with the trick so that they're actually implementing all of the various programs in the way they need to be implemented. Brain Stranigan mentions the movie The Prestige, and that is exactly right. A great reference. If you guys haven't seen the movie, you won't get it. If you haven't seen the movie, you should. And then check out the Badlands Story Hour episode that we did about it. But people do need to be on board with that. And to the extent that they are on board with all that, then they've done the work, they've provided the paper trails, and there is actually a paper trail of evidence of all of these crimes. Again, another argument for the benefit of allowing this 4-year pause period while the public catches up at least some distance to what's been happening over this time. So very interesting, a lot of signal there. The fact that they are going to be using this, preserving this evidence and going after the deep state now that we have this new government coming really into form. People are going to be seeking accountability, and they will understand when accountability is worked toward by the incoming administration, by Donald Trump and the people doing that work on his behalf. I want to talk about the media a little bit here, because their role in all of this, in preserving the regime for so long, was a big part of that control system. And without that part of the control system, they're screwed. We've talked about this many times. This has been true for at least 100 years. I suspect hundreds of years, and I really suspect thousands of years. The way to control countries and to control leaders is first through the media layer. That's the party of false decorum layer, where people's reputations are influenced and manipulated. People work their entire lives to build a certain reputation that allows them to advance in that abstract power hierarchy and make more money, gain more material wealth. And there's a lot that can be done to influence them from just the reputational basis. You say a bad thing about someone, you spread a former scandal, something that person did in their past life that they would regret or be ashamed of. Those are things that can be used to control people, and they are used for that. If the media fails, then they have the financial layer. They will debank people and bankrupt them. They have financial corruption and compromise that they can use. They can buy people off. At the country level, they can wage economic warfare through the use of sanctions and currency manipulation. And then if those two layers fail, the media layer and the financial layer, then they go to who actually controls the military. The media layer seems to be gone. And since the fake election and the result that would not please the liberal audiences, the communist propaganda media is declining in its, we can say it again, prestige. The New York Post here, MSNBC ratings plunge after Trump election victory as more than half of primetime audience flees. So this is true of CNN as well. There's Joy Reid. What an unfortunate person. MSNBC primetime viewership plunged 54% in the days after Donald Trump won the White House as the network's audience tuned away from its left-leaning coverage, according to a report. Again, as I said, CNN down as well. Alex Wagner tonight down. All In with Chris Hayes down. Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell, 54% down. 808,000 according to Nielsen data. That is 3 hours of corporate media in a night, heavily advertised. These people are seen to be experts and celebrities, and their presence is no longer requested by their own audiences. Now, I am very familiar with this phenomenon because as someone who was not a Trump supporter in 2016, as soon as I saw the results of that election, I was immediately like, what is it that all these other people think? Because there were all these other people. I didn't realize that there were all these other people. We were told that that there is this liberal majority that elected Barack Obama. The majority of what our culture projects is that liberal majority. So the majority of culture projects a real majority among the people. And I was totally invested in that. And I knew on some level that in Hollywood, the educated people, the famous people, the people who controlled media were projecting that culture because we were actually, in a real sense, building culture. And so you think, of course, we're the majority. There's no evidence from the inside that there is a majority outside of that doesn't agree at all. And when I saw Donald Trump be elected, despite all of media telling me that it was a certainty that Hillary Clinton would be elected, I realized I was listening to the wrong people and probably reading the wrong news, and I was being lied to, or at least I was being misled in a way that was going to cause negative consequences in my own life. Because if I was going to talk about the things that I believed, and I was going to believe certain things based on claims from authority, and those authorities were all really bad, then they were just going to keep making me look stupid over and over again. And I don't really like looking stupid. Now, apparently there's lots of communists out there who have no problem with it and are just really down for the cause. And they really think it makes them look like a good person. But that wasn't really my thing. Like I was, everybody could judge that for themselves. I'm not sure what people would think looking back on my former approach, but my approach generally was like, I really believed that people didn't know anything. And it wasn't that I was like, oh, I'm good. I wasn't doing the woke thing. I wasn't trying to, my primary thing wasn't signaling my goodness. I think if anything that I was signaling, it was the level that I was taking in information and processing it. Now, all that information was coming in from the false reality. And to that extent, I completely blew it. But it was just a slightly different thing in tone, I think. After that point in 2016, after Donald Trump was announced the winner, it was immediately like, I have to figure out what's wrong with this. So I started reading articles from Fox News. I started reading the National Review, started reading commentary, and, it'll take you right down into kind of corporate republicanism and into neoconservatism. And all of that, because they are willing to actually make arguments that aren't based on identity, seems way smarter right away. And so I was in there for probably 3 or 4 years, or maybe even longer. It was up until throughout 2020 when I started seeing Donald Trump in those COVID press conferences that I was like, oh, wait a second. The neocons are also lying about what Trump says. Wow, that's really something to behold. So both of these sides are lying about Trump. Well, that makes Trump clearly the good guy. And at that point, I was in and started figuring things out along a whole different line of thought. But what was immediately clear was that CNN and MSNBC and the New York Times and the LA Times and the Washington Post and Politico, et cetera, had all lied to me and they had all steered me wrong. So I needed to move on to something else. And I think that there's a lot of hopefully redeemable communists over there who have gone down that road over the course of the last week, and it's showing in the ratings, which I think is impressive. We also have this today from Deadline, which is an entertainment industry and Hollywood-based outlet, usually entertainment news, sometimes media coverage. This is the headline from, I guess this is from Monday. Fair and balanced, Trump 2.0 era brings new Los Angeles Times editorial board. Owner promises with Fox News motto echo. Owner, and I don't know, this is kind of an awkward sentence. And owner promises with Fox News motto echo. I think that's closer. The old Fox News motto, of course, being fair and balanced. Weeks after the paper's owner, Patrick Soon-Shiong, scuttled a planned and penned endorsement of Kamala Harris for president, the billionaire Abraxane creator is now putting a whole new editorial board in place, pulling out Fox News's old fair and balanced motto. Soon-Shiong took to social media over the weekend to praise a reader's letter slamming LA Times columnist LZ Granderson over reasons for Donald Trump's election win, and then dropped the news of the new editorial board coming soon. He also noted in Sunday's posting, "I will work toward making our paper and media fair and balanced so that all voices are heard and we can respectfully exchange every American's view from left to right to center. Coming soon, a new editorial board. Trust in media is critical for a strong democracy." Now, we talked about, he also said, "The American people have spoken, and LA Times will take the lead to provide factual and balanced coverage as the country heals its division." Now, we discussed some of that a couple of weeks ago, a couple of weeks ago, on getting the news that not only would the LA Times not do that editorial, also Jeff Bezos would not. And we started seeing them tell us, or started reading them, hearing them tell us that that they were going to move in a more conservative direction. They understood that people didn't trust the media. They said that trust in media is very, very important. Therefore, they are going to provide trustworthy media. They can see that the public consensus has shifted, so they want to shift in line with that public consensus. Now, if you're shifting in line with the public consensus, it sounds like you are just tailoring your same product to a slightly different audience. They want a different brand. And that is what I believe will be provided. The corporate media is not going to do what the independent media does. And to the extent that people believe they will do that and providing more objective form of news, I think that everyone is asking for the rug. They are asking to get the hose again, ultimately, from media. They're just going to go right back down that road. There's only one place that road leads. Corporate media exists to advertise a potential reality that will give the most power back to that corporation. If you were the one funding the major media operation, you would want that media operation to support a series of policies that would also ultimately support the world that allows your organization to succeed. Now, I mean, maybe you have incredible morals and you want to create an outlet that is actually going to tell the truth. I don't know if this is how you market that move. Maybe it is. I'm open to being wrong. I want to see them do better work. Hopefully that's a productive thing. I don't have any faith in them actually being able to do that, which is fine. We can be skeptical about these things. Again, I'm the guy that talks about the American Renaissance being just ahead. So, for me to be skeptical about the corporate news and think that they're probably not going to change into a truth-telling independent media, I don't think that's the sort of skepticism that we have to be too concerned about. I think that's probably a healthy amount of skepticism. And hopefully it's not just me complimenting my own position by saying that. I think that that's probably justified at this point. Beachbound says, skeptical about every single thing. Yes, skeptical about every single thing. Extreme skepticism applied to everything. That does not lead to nihilism, because there are some things about which you do not need to be skeptical. In fact, there are some things about which faith is a requirement, and you will know that you are probably along the right path where everything is judged in terms of skepticism in relation to that, and you can see whether or not the beliefs you are forming conform with the worldview provoked by that faith. I think that is not some new revelation that I am bestowing on anyone. That is one of the most traditional kind of epistemological insights that people in this world have had for millennia longer than I have been around. So this is reprinted in MSN, but this is from the Wall Street Journal yesterday. Trump draft executive order would create board to purge generals. This is some serious stuff right here. And I don't want to go through the entire article. These are always a pain because they delete my highlights. So I'm going to leave the front of this up here on screen. Where did my Telegram go? Everything's just falling apart here. Let's just start through the article, and that'll pull up when it pulls up. The Trump transition team is considering a draft executive order that establishes a warrior board of retired senior military personnel with the power to review 3- and 4-star officers to recommend removals of any deemed unfit for leadership. If Donald Trump approves the order, it could fast track the removal of generals and admirals found to be lacking in requisite leadership qualities, according to a draft order reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. So let's just stop right there. We have a draft of an executive order that Donald Trump might sign at some point, but according to the Wall Street Journal, who has reviewed this draft order, which means someone with access to this draft order took it and gave it to the Wall Street Journal. Now, could someone on Trump's side could have done that? Could as kind of a trial balloon? Sure, that's totally possible. Someone could have leaked it on purpose for the benefit of Donald Trump. It also could be someone with access to the transition team or wants to portray themselves as having access to the transition team, getting a piece of paper from a lobbying organization or think tank and representing that as a potential Trump executive order. The transition team is considering, according to a draft of the order reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. That is all that is really being said here. Okay. Something could be happening. And if that thing is happening, it's like this. But this could just be an info op to suggest that this thing is happening. It could also create a chilling effect on top military officers, given the president-elect's past vow to fire woke generals, referring to officers seen as promoting diversity in the ranks at the expense of military readiness. Is the problem woke generals? No. The problem is generals who are in league, let's say, with the global regime and its agenda and are gearing the military in that direction rather than following the president, the people's president, Donald Trump. And again, parallel here is to Venezuela. Juan Guaido in Venezuela being recognized for years as the president of Venezuela, despite having never been president of Venezuela. He is the regime's guy. The regime does business with. Nicolas Maduro is the other guy. Same sort of effect here in America with the fake president Joe Biden and Donald Trump, who is the people's president and has the patriotic military on his side. As commander-in-chief, Trump can fire any officer at will, but an outside board whose members he appoints would bypass the Pentagon's regular promotion system, signaling across the military that he intends to purge a number of generals and admirals. This is the freakout. This is what makes Donald Trump an authoritarian dictator. The idea that he is going to exercise presidential authority and remove generals and admirals who aren't willing to implement the commander-in-chief's foreign policy and military agendas. That is what makes you an authoritarian dictator. Donald Trump, we are told, only wants loyalists, and he is willing to purge the military in this totally undue fashion in order to get a loyalist military. Now, if that's bad, all that has to happen is somebody has to beat Donald Trump in a real election and then fire all of Donald Trump's military officers and bring back those other ones or elevate their own guys, right? This is what the system allows. Why is only one side allowed to do this? And when the regime does it, they actually tell us that the officers are unpatriotic. They're not doing what the president wants to do. Or actually, they don't even get the respect of that framing. There are little scandals put out about them in order to destroy their reputation and take them out of office, make them unpalatable to the people, and force them to resign on their own. So they don't even, they're actually disgraced in public. And you know what? Truth be told, this should be a bigger disgrace. being a military officer, a high-level military officer who refuses to implement the president's agenda, the commander-in-chief's agenda, and then undermines that agenda at every turn, that should be a bigger disgrace than some weird sex scandal or some story about some military failure. That should be the biggest disgrace. It's unfortunate that it isn't. Back to the article here, just a couple more paragraphs. The draft order says it aims to establish a review that focuses, quote, on leadership capability, strategic readiness, and commitment to military excellence. The draft doesn't specify what officers need to do or present to show if they meet those standards. The draft order originated with one of several outside policy groups collaborating with the transition team and is one of numerous executive orders under review by Trump's team, a transition official said. So there are all these draft executive orders. There's no indication that Donald Trump had this executive order written on his behalf, though he may have. This sounds like something Donald Trump would do. This sounds like something we can all get behind, depending on whether or not this reporting is accurate about what the draft executive order says. But just to finish out here, the Warrior Board would be made up of retired generals and non-commissioned officers who would send their recommendations to the president. Those identified for removal would be retired at their current rank within 30 days. So that is an entirely reasonable way to get rid of regime-oriented officials at the top levels of the military. I am also totally on board with the idea, as Douglas Macgregor notes many times, there are far more generals than there ever were, even during World War II, in our biggest military operation that we've probably ever had, at least in his framing. There were just a handful of generals back then. Now there are many times more than that. To scale back on that should not be something that is seen as a bad thing. The military, if it is to be the military that the founders and the people of that era recommended, would be much smaller. And considering that other countries' very powerful militaries are much smaller than ours and run at a fraction of the cost, it is entirely justifiable to consider that there is rampant waste, fraud, and abuse within the military, and that it was overseen by these people to implement a regime that is antithetical to the commander-in-chief's agenda. So I don't know, should we be shedding a tear for these people? I don't believe that we should. Despite that, there are some shedding tears for these people, and there is a good bit of panic out there, not only about these generals, but about the nomination of Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense. And you have to wonder how many of these are going to be ultimately appointed in a recess period so that they will not have to deal with the machinations of the illegitimate Senate in order to be brought through and put into their position. Polymathanon says, that's because you can't make Fulbird colonel without political approval, which is asinine. Wonderful. There you go. So we're going to have some review of that process in the near future. Ezra Cohen-Watnick has been tweeting up a storm over the last week or so. Here's one about this subject in particular. He has that girl who was one of the most unfortunate memes ever, that crazed liberal who is crying out, the woman with the short hair and the beanie and glasses, kind of like a slightly more feminine Tim Pool, just absolutely losing her shit on Trump's inauguration. I don't know why she doesn't have a pink pussy hat on, but Ezra Cohen-Watnick says, DC defense blob upon learning that the SecDef won't be another dumb 4-star general who they can trick and manipulate. And that's going pretty hard at the dumb 4-star generals. And someone who we think at least is probably very much in the know about these situations. Let us continue here. I want to play a couple great clips, really just revealing where some of these regime figures come from. This first from MSNBC Jeremy Bash on with Nicole Wallace. Jeremy Bash is, first of all, the former husband of CNN's Dana Bash. He was also one of the 51 former intelligence officials responsible, one of the main guys responsible for the Politico article based on the letter from those officials claiming that Hunter Biden's laptop was in fact Russian disinformation. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I'm not entirely certain that I'll be able to pull this clip up without altering its format. And if I have to do that, it'll take me just a second, but we will have to hold for processing. Yes, I will have to do that. This is not working. The good thing is that a clip this long takes just seconds on a program called Handbrake, by the way, guys. If you ever want to change your video formats, including for long movies, Handbrake is the way to do it. And perhaps Handbrake is not even going to let me do it. Oh, this video's not working at all. They're really messing with me right now. Let me give this one more try. There we are. This will work. Okay, thank goodness for Chef Boyardee. Okay, I hope that I am back. I think that I am back. Let me know, guys, if you have me. Put a 1 up or let me just know that we're good. Because if we're good, I think we can continue. All right. Sounds like we are back. Okay. Thank goodness. Thank you, guys. Okay. So then let's continue here. We got a couple of videos here. Let's start with Jeremy Bash. I don't know how much you guys would have missed what I was saying, but let's try to do this Bash video. This will work. Okay.
Being institutionalist means you believe and subscribe to the view of separation of powers in our constitutional system. And you kind of hit this at the top of the show. We're going to be entering a period in which Donald Trump not only controls the entire executive branch, his party will control the Senate, probably the House, and a significant majority of the U.S. Supreme Court. So anybody who's taken civics understands that when you control all three branches of government with a political party, it's much more challenging to have checks and balances. And so as difficult as it is to contemplate this at this moment, Nicole, I think we have to rely on Republicans, Republican elected officials, Supreme Court justices, and people inside government and outside government who are willing to continue to have checks and balances, to continue to hold the executive branch accountable. If there's an unlawful order given to the United States military, I expect, and I think it will be the case, that uniformed military will not carry out unlawful orders. If these people try to politicize the work of the Central Intelligence Agency, I know the people who work at the Central Intelligence Agency, they will not allow their work to be politicized. They will speak the truth, and the truth will set them free. That's emblazoned on the wall of the original headquarters building at Langley. There's a kind of a mode of operating, a view, a loyalty to the Constitution that honestly is bigger than any other idea of who's in power, who's your commander-in-chief, who's calling the shots in the executive branch. And I think we can have faith in people who believe in these institutions.
Now, a lot of people this morning took that as deep state actors within the military not being willing to follow Donald Trump's orders. And that could be what he's saying. Okay. Not going to take that away whatsoever. But he did specifically say that they wouldn't follow unlawful orders. And the truth is that no one in the military is supposed to follow unlawful orders. The question is really just whether or not Donald Trump would be giving unlawful orders. And the answer to that is obviously not, though they will be framed that way. And they may use that false reality layer over the Constitution and that false reality layer of government to suggest that Donald Trump's orders are unlawful when they are not. So going to be something to watch for in the future. These people are people who have depended on the subversion of Donald Trump over the years. I always want to leave open the possibility that even people like Jeremy Bash could just be a ghost in the machine or someone who is under control or whatever it might be, because we want to be open-minded to these things and we don't want to condemn strangers who we don't ultimately know all that much about. But it sounds like he's suggesting the subversion of Donald Trump, and what we've seen from the past would totally fall in line with a view like that. I want to watch one more. Actually, first there was a Rumble rant from Brogent in the chat. I think the draft memo was made by MSM, then reported. Trump can do this just by reviewing what generals have done over the past 4 years. For instance, every officer who violated the Uniform Code of Military Justice and U.S. law by mandating the jab. And Brogent, I'm 100% with you. Trump does not need to put out an executive order. I guess maybe you would, to form that board if that's what he wanted it to be. If he didn't just want to seem like he was making those decisions by fiat, if he wanted it to open it up to a panel of people who might represent a diversity of viewpoints and would then be more immediately accountable to the people and be able to explain it to the people at length, what the negotiations, what the deliberations, maybe is a better word for it, entailed. I think that would make sense. So maybe that's why it would be handled in an executive order to grant an official capacity to that board and let the people know that these are the people who are reviewing all of this on behalf of the president and will then make these recommendations to the president. And then the president would be exercising his own constitutional authority and carrying out those decisions. So it could make sense to me on that level. Maybe that's the reason why they are going in this process, if that is what it is. But as you said, it could just be the media or someone making that up, laundering that through the media and putting that out to the public so that the public will react in some way. And then maybe the public, maybe they're able to gin up some negative sentiment that has something like this not enacted. They're going to be unsuccessful in doing that because they don't have, the public doesn't trust them anymore. And the public wants accountability for all of these things that have been done wrong over the years. So I don't see that as being effective. But I think you might totally be right in terms of the strategy we shall see in the future, maybe. In terms of the media influencing public sentiment and using leaked information to be able to do that, that's kind of a perfect segue into this clip from Mark Zaid, the attorney, or maybe it's Zaid. I don't want to misrepresent the pronunciation of that name, but because who knows, he's a Washington communist attorney. He could do terrible, terrible things to me. This is CNN from yesterday. Maybe I might even have to stop this a couple times because this clip is so incredible.
So thanks so much for being with us. And this is kind of a little bit of a separate subject, although tangentially related to what Kate was just talking about there. But you are advising clients who are worried about retribution from the incoming Trump administration, revenge. And I was reading an article where you said you were counseling some people to leave the country. Why?
Well, look, Donald Trump and those in his inner circle have been very clear over the period of time, and especially during the campaign, that they do intend to retaliate, and they do intend to retaliate swiftly. They've made those promises. He said that he intends to have his second administration one that fulfills promises. So it would be naive and foolish for us not to take any of this seriously. And we're preparing. Now, I've represented a lot of clients who have been specific targets of President Trump and those around him. We're not just talking about my federal employee workers in different agencies who are uncomfortable, like you've just heard in this last segment. We're talking about people who have been specifically called out by the former president of the United States. And we're not rushing to it. I'm not saying sell your home, move overseas, never come back, become an expat. I'm telling certain clients, a small number, that, you know what, take a vacation for inauguration and let's see what happens in the days or week or two afterwards.
So already that's kind of incredible. He's put a time frame on this thing. He's saying that around the inauguration, maybe that time specifically, they need to get these people out of here. That would be incredible. I mean, we got about, what is it going to be? 9 weeks till then? We will have, so 1 week from today will be the 20th of November. So it will be 2 full months, a 30-day month, 31-day month. So we've got 8 weeks plus 3 days. So 8.5 weeks, 9.5 weeks from today. That's not a lot of time left for people. Are they going to plan some vacations and get out of town? That's basically just like raising your hand and saying, I did it. Here I go. I just happen to have a vacation scheduled for the inauguration. We're told that for January 6th and for the inauguration, we are going to have the security state brought back into position. Maybe we will have a longer period than just that. There's still a lot of game left to be played, as I said last week. You know, the TV said that Trump won the fake election. So now Trump is the president and people treat him as the president right now. We had the optical transfer of power, the smooth transition of power that Mike Pompeo suggested 4 years ago. And hey, Mike Pompeo apparently is not going to be in the new administration. Some people are saying he is a, some kind of traitor, deep state, whatever. Could be just that he's finished with his job and he's going to disappear into the background. No questions will ever be asked about this period, and it'll just smoothly transition. No one will even know that this 4-year period happened. And this is something that John and I have talked about on Devolution Power Hour for a couple of years now. Just the possibility that there might never actually be a public knowledge that any of this happened. And that means that we walk around the rest of our lives sounding like crazy people. Although I think that over time, people will come to understand what we were saying. And I think that the evidence will play out in a fashion where people are going to be able to believe that themselves. Whether or not that's ever going to be admitted or acknowledged from a higher level, who knows? Mike Pompeo is out of the game. Did he get out on a good note? Did he get out on a traitorous note? Is Donald Trump just doing the kayfabe that allows him to leave? Robert F. Kennedy Jr., in his interview with Tucker Carlson that was probably, 14, 15 months ago, August or September of last year, talked about being in a meeting with Mike Pompeo in Las Vegas and Pompeo having Secret Service in 2023. So what are we supposed to make of that? Everybody's just going to have to take that as they will. In terms of these people leaving around the inauguration, would be very, very interesting to see. We not only have the media reports over the last year about people preparing to leave, where they're going to flee to, whether it will be Europe or Israel, or Europe or Israel, that they would be fleeing for some reason based on Donald Trump being an authoritarian and not because they actually committed crimes against America or crimes against humanity, and are going to some place where they can find a dual citizenship and just get out while the getting is good. it would seem like a lot of them would have their eyes on the global regime proxy states like a Ukraine formerly, or like Israel, maybe hopefully formerly, but it seems like still now. There would be somewhere to run and hide that wouldn't extradite them. And I guess, this is a story yet to be told. Let's continue with that video. Oh, where did it go?
Do you think he could do? What form would retribution, retaliation, revenge take in your mind?
Well, it can vary depending on, obviously, the individuals. It could be as harsh as criminal prosecution. I mean, you yourself and your network are potentially vulnerable. How many times have you done a story on classified information and it being leaked? Well, under the Espionage Act, that's prosecutable. The only reason why it hasn't happened previously is that the norm of the Justice Department has been not to prosecute journalists. There will.
So journalists can be prosecuted under the Espionage Act for these leaks of classified information. That sounds like he's talking about Adam Schiff and people like Adam Schiff, the people in Congress who would be leaking that classified intelligence information, and the media outlets that were hosting Adam Schiff over and over and over and over and over again for these last 9 years, while he took intelligence, supposedly, that he had gained within the House Select Committee on Intelligence, and taking that out and reporting it in the media. They would then be laundering his espionage as news, exposing all of this to the American public. They could be prosecuted under the Espionage Act, but haven't been based on the norms. And so you've got regime uniparty government that would be doing the prosecution, and we have regime uniparty media that would be the subject of that prosecution, the target of that prosecution. So of course that never happened. That's not the situation anymore. So will we see those prosecutions happen now? I'm just going to rewind that a bit because it's really incredible. And he says, he points at the CNN guy and he's like, well, it could be you. This blew me away when I heard this.
Well, it can vary depending on, obviously, the individuals. It could be as harsh as criminal prosecution. I mean, you yourself and your network are potentially vulnerable. How many times have you done a story on classified information and it being leaked? Well, under the Espionage Act, that's prosecutable. The only reason why it hasn't happened previously is that the norm of the Justice Department has been not to prosecute journalists. There will be no norms that are in the second Trump administration. So we're preparing for all this. It could be tax audits like we saw back in the Nixon administration. It could be terminations like your last discussion was about. It could take the form of civil penalties. I mean, there is a whole host of usage of laws, not even abuse of laws, but the use of laws in a way that hasn't been typical or perhaps extreme that people could fall victim to. Again,
how about that? So it's not even the abuse of laws, just the use of laws. And if the use of laws suggests prosecutions for people who would then be guilty of violating those laws, are we supposed to want those laws not to be, those crimes not to be prosecuted? That seems like the suggestion from the mainstream media, because that is the system that they are accustomed to. There is actually a two-tiered system of justice in this country, and these people have never been prosecuted for this stuff ever before. And so they are, the laws exist so that they can prosecute people who aren't on board with the agenda. It is really just a one-tiered system of laws. The laws only apply to a certain group of people and don't apply at all to anyone else. And you can say that's a two-tiered system of laws, but I'm saying that the one tier isn't actually subject to the law. That's incredible. These people should be gone after. He mentions the tax thing. Are tax audits inappropriate? Now, I don't think that there should be any taxes, but if there are going to be taxes, then why is it only certain people who are audited? Why do why does the politicization of the IRS only target certain political target certain viewpoints in certain parties, as we've seen for, I don't know, what is it, 16 years? When did the Obama administration begin doing that? The beginning of Project Veritas was exposing exactly those sorts of problems. Let's continue with Zaid or Zaid for a little longer.
And it's just preparation.
And is it Donald Trump exclusively that you're concerned about?
No, actually, in many ways, it's more about the people who will be among him. In the first administration, and I represented quite a number of them who were in the White House with Donald Trump, there were people, for example, who would take documents off his desk so that he wouldn't sign them, and he would forget about it. That we saw in the Nixon administration as well, in fact. We're concerned this time around with the extremists, some of them who will be around him, that they will bring the documents to the president to sign. I mean, we've got people like Steve Bannon and others who have made it very clear where they stand on seeking political retribution against their perceived enemies using what is called lawfare, which they have been doing for the last 4 years when he's been out of office, in suing perceived enemies.
I just want to ask, Mark, you're a lawyer, a good lawyer.
So Donald Trump and the people around him have been using lawfare for the last 4 years. That should be news to everybody, because they were never the side that used lawfare. Lawfare was used against that side by the regime, by the people Mark Zaid is concerned about being, for whom Mark Zaid is concerned about their prosecutions. I guess we're going to see more of that. Maybe he's talking about Stephen Miller and some of those kind of Trump adjacent legal efforts. The America First Legal group has been doing some of that over the last few years, filing freedom of information lawsuits, filing and doing kind of the think tank work for the basis, the research behind some of the lawsuits based on, centering around censorship and whatnot. So maybe he's right. Maybe we're going to see that. But if the laws are valid, and we can argue about that, I'm certainly open to the arguments. If they want to say that these laws aren't valid and aren't constitutional, by all means do that. Let's get rid of all of that, that side of our laws and regulations and everything. None of that should exist in the first place, and people should not follow it. That would probably be a bigger win than seeing many of these low-level people actually serve in prison or have their, and they should be punished according to the law that they broke. But a big win would be getting rid of all the ridiculous laws and statutes that help build this system and cement it in place and give people on the regime side the ability to prosecute crimes that should not be crimes. So I'll take that win, and let's close this out.
A very active lawyer. Do you feel like you have recourse to fight this in the courts in the coming months if this were to happen?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, look, the judicial system is still intact. There are a lot more judges appointed by the president, former president, but I've been before many of them. And oftentimes, if not all the time, they're not swayed by political aspects of it. There are jurisdictions where that's been a problem for sure. The biggest problem with challenging this in court based on what the administration might do come January 20th is the length of time that it takes. If someone is prosecuted or sued, I mean, Trump threatened to sue me for treason. It doesn't exist, but he did it. But, if something like that happens, it takes.
Trump threatened to sue me for treason. It doesn't exist, but he did it. What doesn't exist? Your treason? Being able to sue someone for treason? I don't know if suing is the right way to go about a treason charge, but I imagine that it does exist and that it could be used, probably not through a civil lawsuit, maybe a military tribunal. I don't know. I'm just saying. I don't know if that sort of thing is going to happen, but the likelihood that it could happen is, I think, probably increasing over the past couple of days, certainly in the minds of people like our pal Mark right here. That is really incredible, just worrying on his own about treason.
It's time to go through federal court. We just saw that with the special counsel prosecutions. The reason why they failed was not substantively, it was procedurally. They took too long. So that, I'd hate for any of my clients.
So the Jack Smith proceedings failed because they took too long in the eyes of Mark Zaid, not because they were fake in the first place. And Jack Smith wasn't a legitimately appointed special counsel in the first place. No, no, no. Only because of the timing. And now Donald Trump has been reelected as president. He is going to get rid of those cases. They're not going to be able to prosecute them. That is why Donald Trump won those cases, quote unquote. It's not because the cases were illegitimate. The cases, of course, were legitimate. And Trump, I guess, just got lucky. He ran out the clock. So Mark Zaid is not worried about these treason charges because it's just going to take too long to get through the courts. That is some serious cope.
To be facing whether criminal or civil prosecutions in certain way, and they are victimized for that for 2-3 years. That's still not.
So people would be victimized by these prosecutions for 2 or 3 years, and that would be the new offense. That, I guess, is the new definition of what it means to be a brutal authoritarian dictator. I guess everyone can make of that what they will. That does not sound to me like brutal authoritarian dictatorship, but I suppose it's the best they've got in terms of explanations that will bring people over to their side. It seems to me that the country wants some accountability, or the public sentiment in favor of Donald Trump would not be as strong as it is, generally speaking. So let's go to some of these questions. I was going to get into a bunch of these nominations and stuff. I'll try to do another episode this week, and so we can go through some of that. In terms of just news, there have been a bunch of announcements today. Matt Gaetz as the Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard as the Director of National Intelligence. The Senate has determined that John Thune is going to be the Senate leader, the majority leader, a Mitch McConnell guy. Again, I don't think that body is legitimate. The Senate should not be subject to elections by the people. That's not what it was intended to be in the first place, although that might be a better body. All of the stuff from the Constitution on needs to be reconsidered. Okay. So the way that senators are elected, whether or not the Constitution was changed unduly and that our elections have just been a farce since, what was it, 1812? I'd be open to all of those arguments, and I think that they should all be had and hashed out. But for now, we're being told that John Thune is the guy, and maybe that's necessary. Maybe we need to see the House and the Senate do terrible work under uniparty government. If this is the sort of stuff we still need to see for whatever reason, then they've got their guy. Everybody was pushing Rick Scott. It was insane that you have two obvious uniparty guys, and then Rick Scott, who, you could go either way on. Maybe Rick Scott's a good man. I don't mean to cast aspersions on Rick Scott, but not exactly like Trump said. It's this is the guy I want in that position. And then the people got behind that. We were just granted a series of positions, and then the entire info op went ballistic, saying that Rick Scott is like our new God King, and everybody went along with it, man. And again, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with Rick Scott, and I'm not necessarily saying that there's anything wrong with the television characters in that info op. But when you see all the television characters immediately telling you that the solution to everything is Rick Scott, you have to doubt Rick Scott. You have to doubt the television characters, and you should probably assume that a rug is going to get pulled and it's not going to be that guy. And hey, man, all good. I don't know every last detail of how this op works. We can glean from it what we can over time and try to understand it as best we can. Ultimately, we're not going to know all that stuff. But for now, if there is going to be a congressional or senatorial opposition to Donald Trump, you would expect that it will be seen to be under the leadership of a guy who was known to be anti-Trump. And so John Thune would fit the description for the necessary character in that position. So down to some of these, we'll talk more about that. Hopefully I'll get an opportunity to do another episode or two this week, although we will be having the GART thing. I'll do my best. I always try to not miss episodes, but as I've said, I was going to be traveling a bit, and also just trying to scale back on the 5 days a week produced episodes. It's not possible to continue with that, and also do some of the other things that I want to do that I think may be ultimately more important contributions than dropping a podcast 5 days a week. Someone was having an issue with the merch link. I will always say, I put one of the links up to the Spreadshirt because she wants the OK Commie mug. That is not on the Rise Attire link. Those links will always be in the episode description or at linktree imyourmoderator.com, or search linktree.com/imyourmoderator. So there are a number of places to find those links. Occasionally those links won't work. cancelcouture.myspreadshop.com is where you can get all the merch I have designed, as well as some different options on some of the Rise Attire designs. I actually put out a piece of merch last week that I am very, let's say, pleased with myself for designing. And it is the opt-out merch, where I have a very tired, I'm trying to find a good piece, where I have a very tired ghost who is hanging out on his spooky couch, just waiting to, just really needing a break from things, because, you know, the InfoWar business, it really does get to be a lot. And sometimes we all choose to opt out. Here is the, let's go with a hoodie. Here's a nice hoodie. How about that? The graphic, there it is. This awesome little ghost, spooky chandelier up here. Opt out. And I thought about making it a statement. For now, it's a question. I might switch that eventually to a statement. But that's the website where you can, that's where you can find all of my personal designs. And then the Rise Attire INTL project has the Rise Attire designs. Julian says, looking forward to it. Oh, that meaning that this episode right here. Can't wait for GART to start. Got a virtual ticket. Florida will be my in-person GART. That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to GART as well. People are feeling very celebratory. I think we'll probably have some great conversations on some interesting subjects. The virtual tickets you can get at badlandsmedia.tv/events. So back to the Substack comments, and then we will wrap it up. And I'll hope to continue with some of this later in the week. Michelle says, one common phrase has really bugged me. The public couldn't handle the truth all at once. Something like that. We all did and are still doing it. So I disagree with this in a huge way. Am I missing something? Michelle, I don't believe you are missing something. And the problem is that I think you're referring to Q posts. And I can totally agree with the sentiment. There are going to be people who respond to having their world turned upside down very poorly. And it is better to introduce them to the ways that their world might be turned upside down. And then eventually the world will show them that the world actually is upside down already and needs to be righted. And I think that that is probably the most peaceful way for people to get out of it, but that isn't going to be ultimately possible for everyone. And I'm kind of inferring that Beachbound may be, yes, it says yes, Chris, I was referring to Q. So that's the same questioner. I can see that maybe the people can't be told all of everything at once. Like if you are someone who believes in absolutely everything that the television has to say, and you are still wearing a COVID mask, you probably aren't ready to hear about regime-approved child trafficking, okay, and the torture that goes along with it. You're probably not ready to hear about how entire branches of science are fake. And, maybe they wouldn't take that well. Maybe they would go crazy. Maybe at that point they get violent, even within their own friend and family groups. And so maybe a slower approach is needed. I'm totally open to all of that. And I'm also fine with Q saying it and fine that people adopt that viewpoint. What I'm not fine with is that being used as a justification for why people telling the truth need to be censored while other people lie and continue to project a stage play for the American public. And that is what's still happening, okay? We are getting a stage play. This stuff is scripted and planned, and it's just being disseminated to the public. And, there's an amount of time where we can accept that from the people operating in public, but at no time do we need to accept that from people in the truth community telling us, no, you know what? Don't talk about that. You can't talk about that. This is a black hat psyop to make us look stupid. You can't talk about that. You can't demand honesty from public officials. You can't demand honesty from media because Hugh says that other people aren't ready for it. Okay, well, when people tell me that, those people are repeating the sorts of dangerous slogans that would come from media psyops. Like, we don't have to demand truth from the people claiming to be truth tellers. We don't have to do that as truth seekers. We don't have to do that as people who might be a little bit ahead of where the public at large is. Well, then you're abandoning your own duty to tell truth and to seek truth and to expect that it be communicated on our behalf to the people who are propped up as the communicators. So I don't stand for any of that. And if that is coming from the top down and it is required for people operating at one of those top levels, then so be it. Okay. And we don't have to damn those people. I'm not suggesting that there should be aggression or anything like that. But in terms of where we choose to put our time and energy and money, ultimately, those shouldn't be the places that we do it. Cheers to Tucker Carlson. I'm not trying to tell anybody how to spend their money. But if you want entertainment media to exist and you're paying a guy a monthly fee to project corporate media narratives, maybe that's not the best use of that money. And I'll leave it at that because I don't hate Tucker Carlson. I understand that maybe it's a necessary media operation that he is executing faithfully and dutifully. And we can honor him for that someday down the line if that's the case. But Tucker's going to be okay with some criticism. And I imagine that if he is the honest man he portrays himself to be and the America First man and the Christian First man who he portrays himself to be, then he'd be okay with this criticism because he knows what he's doing. And if he is sold into and bought into the necessity of that operation, then more power to him. And so be it. I'm not privy to that information. So what I have to judge is whether or not someone seems to be obviously telling the truth or obviously lying. And Beachbound just followed up saying, just tired of the coddling idea being necessary. Again, you can't coddle people if you want a government of, by, and for the people. If you want the people to be faithful and effective participants in a government like that, then they have to know things, and you can't be making excuses for why they're not allowed to know things. So I'm 100% in agreement with you. This has been my long-standing position on these ideas. And, what we've seen since the Donald Trump election, we were told that all of these lies were in service of getting Trump elected. Those people haven't stopped lying at all. Maybe Tucker will end up being press secretary or something. And so be it. Tulsi Gabbard's going to be director of national intelligence. Tulsi Gabbard's a TV character as far as I'm concerned. Maybe she's been in military intel this whole time. She's still a TV character. All these people are. JD Vance, Vivek Ramaswamy. The whole thing is one cohesive information operation being put forward to the American people, and everybody is willingly accepting it as it's projected upon them because they are happy with these people on television. And hey, man, maybe this is the most effective that quote unquote democracy has ever worked. They showed you a story. Everybody liked the story. They said, hey, we approve of this story. We want this story to be telling us how we're supposed to live. That's not the story I would choose. But if we are going to be stuck in this material purgatory forever, I suppose we'd better do it with television characters that we like a little bit better than the other ones. I don't know. I guess our football team won the big game. Spencer Adams says, question, how do we know Trump has the people's mandate when there are fake elections? And I think you might be the same person who commented in the chat earlier. Oh yeah, Forever Tools 67 on Rumble. So, and then followed up, thank you, Chris. I think that we can't keep score. It seems that we can't keep score to see who has the mandate. Many different criteria to look at to consider in depth. Yeah, maybe. I think we can actually keep score pretty easily. Okay. If all the good and intelligent people we know have their hair on fire about something, then we probably need to listen to those people and just see if maybe they're picking up something that other people aren't picking up. If everybody agrees to a certain thing, if that thing is a counter regime thing, I think you can be pretty certain that people are okay with that thing despite all the incentives suggesting they not be okay with that thing. And, then we could talk about what the incentives are. But I think that people have a better impression of what's going on around them than they are given credit for having. I think that we actually need to give a little more credence to what our intuition generally suggests. And we do not need to look for expertise or a declaration of public sentiment to believe that we are capable of understanding the world around us. And I think it behooves us to put our own interpretations first, particularly when those interpretations are formed through a proper epistemology that suggests that we don't know everything, that employs the Socratic method, that makes use of extreme skepticism without bordering on and ending up as bordering on nihilism and ending up as nihilists. And I think that we are entirely capable of doing that. I think that that should be the approach going forward. That is just me. I can speak for myself. And if other people agree with me and want to follow in that way, then wonderful for them. And I think obviously that's the right way now. Maybe in the future I'll think it's some other way. And at that point, I hope that I will express it just the same. But hey, man, these are all our own decisions to make. Okay, we do not have to accept that a television character is going to be our director of national intelligence just because Donald Trump put out a statement on Truth Social for now. And one last thing to say about the transition, in case there's some way that I don't get to another episode this week. If we go back to the 2016 transition period, we have people in there like Chris Christie and Reince Priebus, who are clearly more establishment guys. We also had people like Steve Bannon and Michael Flynn, who are not seen at all as establishment guys, and nonetheless either did not make it into the administration, like as Michael Flynn did not, being removed after having been named the National Security Advisor, being removed before the Trump administration officially began, or Steve Bannon, who was removed soon after. Now, those two guys are very prominent members still of MAGA, who have widespread, if not total, approval by the truth community and MAGA on a very grassroots level. So, these people are being named right now. A spotlight is being shown on them. How they look in the spotlight will be different than how they look right now. And we can reassess at that point. Then we still have, as I said, 9.5 weeks to go until the, quote unquote, beginning of the next Trump administration. So there's a lot of things that can happen over the course of that time. And these are the new suggestions. These are the things that we are going to hash out and that we are going to vet publicly. We should all be very happy that Donald Trump is taking that approach. Yes, he has named these people in an authoritative fashion. It is his job to pick these people, and he has picked them. And now it is our job to respond, to look at these and vet these in public and see how they go and see how the people react to their being named into these positions. And let's see, some of these could be the product of negotiations between the sovereign nationalists and the regime, between Trump and America First and the regime. Sometimes these are going to be concessions to the regime. We're going to accept this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, and reject the rest. And that is how the deal works out. Maybe the regime says you need to take 5 of our people and put them in these positions, or consider from among these potential candidates that are accepted by both sides. Maybe they think they have control of that person. Maybe the truth is that Donald Trump does, or that whoever is behind Trump or aligned with Trump does. And so, I think that the vetting process in public is good and necessary, and only good things can come from that. These people are not our new best friends. These are not our new God kings. These are not our new heroes. We are allowed to form opinions about them. Hopefully those are informed opinions and, trying to remain somewhat objective rather than just, gut reactions and then trying to nail someone on their past associations. Maybe those past associations are entirely relevant and indicative of who they are now, and maybe they aren't. So, there's a lot of factors that we need to weigh in our assessments, and it is totally acceptable to go ahead and do that. So hopefully I will do another podcast this week, whether it's live once I get settled in Myrtle Beach, or whether it's something that I'm able to take the time to record more slowly and go through as I have with the normal show in the past. But one way or another, I will be back soon at the same reasonable time on the same reasonable podcast network. I don't have a network. Masks and lockdowns don't work. They lied to you about a pandemic, and Joe Biden will never be president.
In my mind, that's the end game.
If you're listening for free and would like to support the show, the best way to do that is by signing up for a paid subscription at imyourmoderator.substack.com. You can find the info stream over on Telegram at t.me/veryreasonable. The merch site is cancelcouture.com, and for all my other links, you can visit linktree.com/imyourmoderator. And I'll see you soon. Down on the range.